Hey everyone, for this video I'm going to show you how to install a Black Widow full exhaust system on a Yamaha MT-07 2022. So the very first step, I always like to lay everything out, make sure I have all the parts, everything's in there included, and go through the itemized list, make sure everything is there, make sure there's no damage, and that you're not going to have any hiccups along the way, and that you can complete the job. So here's all the parts we got. Here's the bike. Looks like we're going to have some exhaust bolts up here. They're pretty easy to get to. I have an O2 sensor. I'll show you how to remove that. And then we have a couple of bolts here in the back that I'll have to get to by probably removing the rear sets. But overall, pretty easy job because it's a naked bike, and all those bolts are pretty easy to get to. You can see that one over there. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to start back here. There's a 12mm bolt right there holding on the exhaust, so I'm going to get that one out first. So I opted for a ratchet. I have a 3/8 extension, a wobbly, and a 12mm 6-point socket. So just get that in there. That clears your rear sets. Easy. Okay. We got to do the same on this side, but the rear sets are completely covering that bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these two 6mm Allen bolts and just move that rear set out of the way temporarily. Now I can gain access to that 12mm bolt. So I'm going to remove the wobbly. We'll need that. Use the power tools. That bolt should come right out. That's all you need to do on the back side here. Next would be to remove the, I believe they're 10mm nuts holding the exhaust flanges on, but first I want to remove the O2 sensor. So I'm going to show you a trick when removing O2 sensors, but first I got to get this heat shield off, and there's two 4mm bolts right here. So when you're removing and reinstalling O2 sensors and you can't get to the plug on the end of the wire, what I do is I'll break it loose. I'll mark it with a marker, and then I'll count how many turns it takes to pull it out. So this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7. So we got 4 exhaust flange nuts. They're actually 12mm. So I'm going to get this first one out. And there's one on the back side right here. It's right on the back side, on the opposite side of the flange. Next we'll remove this 12mm nut here, and then there's one on the opposite side over there. Now that we got those exhaust flange nuts off on the front and the 2 exhaust bolts in the back off. It should come out. Oh, there we go. So I got to remove this bracket in order to make way for the new bracket, which is going to go right there. So we just got to remove these 2 10mm bolts. So these go using these 2 holes right here. A nut and a washer on the back side of both, and they're totally different sizes, so it's pretty easy to get them matched up correctly. So this one's a 5mm Allen with a 10mm nut on the backside. So I don't want to tighten that one all the way up until I get this one set. So this one's an 8mm Allen on this side and a 17 on the back. So these 2 exhaust gaskets fell out, so you want to make sure you replace those with new ones every time, because you don't want to have any exhaust leaks. Another thing you want to do is look at the exhaust ports, make sure they're nice and clean, there's not a lot of debris or old gasket material that's built up there. Alright, so I'm looking in the package here. The Black Widow exhaust system came with 2 brand new exhaust gaskets, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse those. I'm going to next is put the 2 exhaust headers on. They're labeled 1 and 2. So the instructions don't actually say which one's the left cylinder, which one's the right one. So I tried it both ways, and as far as I can tell, the one with the number 1 sticker is on the left cylinder and the number 2 is on the right cylinder. So I'm going to install the new exhaust gaskets, and when you're putting them up in the holes where the exhaust manifolds go, these don't really wedge in there, they kind of just fall out. So what I do to save myself a lot of grief is I'll just put a little bit of grease on them, just enough to tack them in place, and that way they don't fall out while I'm installing everything. Get the exhaust gaskets and I just set them in there, and then they stick right in place. Lifesaver. And then I just kind of move them around a little bit. Another good standard operating procedure is to kind of mock everything up. Make sure all the tubes go together, nothing is manufactured wrong. So the left tube has a number 1 sticker on there, which correlates to number 1 right here, and number 2, for number 2, the right cylinder correlates, and this is where you put the exhaust springs. So we have the headers, we got the Y pipe, and then we have the mid pipe that goes to the muffler, and that's where the O2 sensor screws into. So you always want to make sure everything fits. So that's loose, so that's not right. So I'm willing to bet that goes a little tighter. And next step would be to install the headers onto the bike and get those flanges nice and tight. Alright, slide these up into position, hold it there with one hand. First one, actually one at a time. Get those started. nut in the socket. One thing that's important while you're installing an exhaust system is to not tighten anything. So get all the bolts and all the clamps and everything installed and loosely tightened down so that you can jimmy everything to fit, because these aren't perfect. They're not like the factory ones where they fit perfect. A lot of times you gotta like just jam them and twist them and kind of shake them into position. So make sure everything is installed real loose at first, get all the components installed, and then you can start tightening everything once everything's fitted. All right, so header's installed. I got the white pipe installed. Now you install the springs. Alright, next we install this mid pipe right here. This one's going to need the clamp up front. So what I do is I put that on, but I don't want that on the bottom because I don't want it to bottom out anywhere. So I'm probably going to put it wherever I can that it's out of the way. So there. So I'm just mocking that up for now. So now I'm going to mock up the muffler. Kind of see where it goes, because I'm not sure what angle this tube's going to sit at. So this slides on like that, and I kind of just make it look aesthetically pleasing. So when you're mounting exhaust systems, a lot of times there's different ways to rotate certain pipes so things fit differently. So I just make sure that the muffler isn't going to hit the swing arm or going to affect your ground clearance. So I try to get it tucked up as far up as I can, and make sure aesthetically that it looks good, like the angle of the pipe looks good. So this needs to be twisted more like that, and that this pipe is rotated just so. This has a spacer. You want the spacer on the inside of the clamp, not between the two halves of the clamp. So there. Nut and washer on the back, nice and loose so we can jimmy everything exactly where we want it. Next, we're going to install the O2 sensor. So the O2 sensor was up front before, now it's in the back, so I'm going to go ahead and route it a little bit differently. But to do that, I need to take it out of this clamp. Up front here, it's just like a little cable guide, so it came unhooked pretty easily. So it's gonna go in there like that. I'll probably end up just zip tying it out of the way. So one thing I like to do on these O2 sensor threads is I put a little anti-seize on there, because it'll make it a lot easier to pull out the next time. So just like a couple drops worth, and I work it into the threads before it gets started. So I'm going to go ahead and install the O2 sensor here. I counted how many turns it backed out of the other hole, which was 7 turns. So the wires, we want to keep the wires nice and straight once installed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this out 7 turns, install it into there, turn it to 7 turns where it should tighten up, and then that way you'll know that the wires aren't all twisted up. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And that way you know that those wires aren't super twisted. Go ahead and tighten that. And I'm just going to route this through that clamp right there. Hold it out of the way. You don't want that wire resting on the exhaust anywhere. So this clamp is going to go there. It's not going to interfere with anything. And this clamp is probably going to go about like that. And now I can start tightening everything up. So this bolt right here holding the muffler strap on is a 6mm Allen bolt, and it's got a 13mm nut on the back. So I'm not going to tighten that super tight right now. Just want to see where that lines up. This has got a slot in it, so I can maybe position it a little bit differently anywhere I want it. I want to make sure that the strap looks good, it's nice and straight. Next we're going to do these clamps. This one's a 10mm. Okay, that one, now this one. And I'm feeling pretty good about where everything's lined up, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten everything up now. There. Now that I got all those other clamps tight, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these exhaust manifold bolts. And you want to keep in mind that the idea here is that you're tightening it so that there's no exhaust leak. So you are going to try to crush that gasket just like a little bit to get a nice seal on it. You want to tighten these nice and even back and forth. Try not to over tighten these because you might be liable to break off those exhaust studs, and those are very difficult to remove. So give it a good nice snugging. If you want to look up the torque specs on your service manual, you can look it up. I'm willing to bet it's around 18 to 25 foot-pounds. Alright, so we just look it over, feel it tight, everything, make sure nothing rattles, nothing's loose. These all look good. O2 sensor's tight, clamps are tight, springs are on. Exhaust muffler clamp is tight. Next would be to reinstall the right rear set bracket. Alright, so we're about ready to fire up. One last thing I do before I fire it up and get the bike nice and hot is I get some alcohol and a clean paper towel, and I'll wipe down the entire system and get my fingerprints off of it, because you don't want those to essentially burn or cook onto the metal surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, and then we'll give it a fire up and see what it sounds like. That sounds pretty mean. Customer was thinking about leaving the exhaust silencer in there, so I'm going to leave it in there for now, but I will pull it out so we can hear the difference. Alright, here it goes without the baffle in it. sounds pretty mean. I think I'll be stoked. Well, thanks for watching. I hope that installation was thorough and well explained. If you have any questions or anything that wasn't clear, go ahead and message me or leave a comment below. I'll get back to you. So thanks again. I'll see you next time.